something bothering you, Richard?
No, Mom, I'm fine.
Looks to me like he's got girl problems.
What makes you think you're so smart?
Happy Days ran for 11 seasons on ABC, from January 1974 to September 1984. It gave us 255 episodes, one of the most iconic characters in television history, and a vision of the 1950s that America spent a decade watching and loving. But the full story, where it started, what it became, how it changed, and how it ended, is something most people only remember in pieces. Here is the entire story of Happy Days, 1974. Part 1, Milwaukee, 1955, The Cunningham Family. The show opens in the mid-1950s.
David and Ricky don't have cars. Beaver doesn't have a car. Now why should our son be any different?
In a comfortable two-story home on the east side of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The family who lives there is the Cunninghams, and from the very first episode, they are the center of everything. Howard Cunningham, played by Tom Bosley, is the father. He runs a hardware store on the main street, wears cardigans, and represents the steady, decent, slightly square version of American fatherhood that the 1950s produced. He is the man of the house in the traditional sense, provider, authority figure, voice of reason, but also someone who genuinely loves his children and can be moved by their problems. When Howard Cunningham sat down with Richie for a conversation, it was the kind of conversation that resolved things.
He's afraid you're gonna raid the party.
Oh, well, don't worry, Richie. I'm going there to play bridge, not to raid the party.
Not because Howard had all the answers, but because he listened first. Tom Bosley brought a warmth and a gentle authority to the role that made Howard Cunningham one of the most beloved television fathers of his generation. Marion Cunningham, played by Marion Ross, is his wife, a homemaker who keeps the household running with warmth and efficiency. She is the kind of television mother who has dinner on the table and the right word for every situation, but who is also a fully formed human being with opinions, a sense of humor, and a capacity for exasperation that the show deployed gently but memorably. Their children are Richie and Joni. Joni, played by Erin Moran, is the younger sister, a kid at the start of the series who will grow into a teenager and then a young woman across its run.
Hey, Dad, you're going to the hospital pretty soon, huh?
That's right, Joni. You gonna miss me?
No.
Erin Moran played the character with a consistent sweetness that made her progression feel genuinely earned. And Richie Cunningham, the red-haired, freckled, earnest middle child played by Ron Howard, is the protagonist. At the beginning of the series, he is a high school student at Jefferson High School, about as far from cool as it is possible to be, while still being a recognizable human adolescent. He is sweet, a little naive, eager to fit in, and constantly getting into situations that his friends make worse and his parents help him untangle. Howard had been cast after director George Lucas, who had seen the original pilot, cast him in American Graffiti in 1973, and the film's success was one of the reasons ABC decided to move forward with Happy Days after the pilot had initially been shelved.
I won't know what to say to her. That's why I got you the book. Then she knows you're not inexperienced about those things. I show her the book.
There is also Chuck Cunningham, an older brother who plays basketball and is around in the first 2 seasons. Chuck's departure from the show after season 2 remains one of the most complete vanishing acts in television history. He simply stops appearing, is never mentioned, and is never addressed. The show moved on as though he had never existed, and the audience followed without ever quite being asked to. Richie's 2 best friends are Warren Potsy Weber, played by Anson Williams, and Ralph Malph, played by Don Most. Potsy is Richie's oldest friend. They've known each other since childhood. A generally well-meaning kid who is better at enthusiasm than execution.
How'd you like a chance at the big time, huh? I mean excitement, chicks, movies, cross-country road tours.
He sings, he performs, He has a genuine warmth that makes him sympathetic even when he is in the middle of making things worse. Ralph is the class clown, always ready with a joke, usually a bad one, and famous for following every punchline with "I still got it." These three navigate high school together, chasing girls, avoiding trouble, failing at the first, and finding plenty of the second. The world they inhabit is post-war American suburbia in its most idealized form. Arnold's Drive-In, the local hangout presided over by Arnold Takahashi, played by Pat Morita in the early seasons, is where the teenagers congregate after school and on weekends. It is the social center of the show's universe, a place with booths and a jukebox and the permanent atmosphere of a Saturday afternoon.
A little bit differently. She reads poetry.
Yeah, I know what beatniks are. I read an article about them in the Saturday Evening Post.
Well,
The music is rock and roll, the cars are enormous, and the cultural anxieties of the actual 1950s, McCarthy, Korea, the beginning of the civil rights movement, are largely absent. This Milwaukee is a place of innocence, designed for nostalgia rather than documentary accuracy. Gary Marshall, who created the show, was offering a memory of a time, not necessarily the time as it had been, but the time as the people living through the 1970s wished it had been. And hovering at the edges of the Cunninghams' world, from the very first episode, is a figure the show will gradually move from the periphery to the center of everything. Part 2, The Fonz. Arthur Fonzarelli, Fonzie, the Fonz, is played by Henry Winkler.
now you got a chance to move in on some choice Hollywood stuff. Yeah, but it's just for one night.
And he is one of the great accidents of American television casting. In the first season, Fonzie is a minor character. He is a high school dropout, a greaser, a motorcycle-riding outsider who exists at the margins of Richie's world. He is cool in a way that Richie and Potsy and Ralph can only aspire to. Effortlessly confident, capable of attracting women with a gesture, comfortable with himself in a way that middle-class Richie is absolutely not. In the early episodes, Fonzie wears a gray windbreaker, not the leather jacket he would later become inseparable from. A BC was nervous about the leather jacket. It seemed too associated with delinquency, with danger, with the wrong kind of role model. Gary Marshall eventually won the argument by making Fonzie a mechanic.
Got me Coke? I don't want Coke. Sniff it. Sniff it? That's right. Put your nose where your mouth is.
Establishing that the jacket was work clothing and therefore legitimate. The leather stayed. It was the right decision. The jacket became one of the most recognizable costumes in television history, and the original was eventually acquired by the Smithsonian Institution for its permanent collection. As Season 1 moved into Season 2, something unexpected was happening. Audiences were responding to Fonzie with an intensity that the show's creative team hadn't anticipated. Fan mail was arriving addressed to Henry Winkler. Children were dressing as Fonzie for Halloween. The character who had been written as a supporting figure was becoming the reason people tuned in. Henry Winkler himself was deeply conscious of the responsibility that came with this.
Yeah, I can understand that. I was young once. Why don't you put your masterpiece on the old bulletin board?
He was careful throughout the show's run about how Fonzie's behavior was depicted, insisting that the character model a kind of cool that was ultimately about character and decency rather than transgression. Gary Marshall recognized what was happening and retooled the show. By Season 3, Fonzie was no longer at the margins. He had been moved into the apartment above the Cunninghams' garage, a setup that allowed him to maintain his independence while making him functionally part of the family. He and Richie developed a genuine friendship, with Fonzie serving as a kind of idealized older brother, someone who had authority and experience and cool that Richie lacked, but who genuinely cared about the Cunninghams and their lives. Howard and Marion accepted him as part of their household with a warmth that reflected the show's central argument.
See you, Cunningham.
See you, Cunningham.
that coolness and decency were not actually opposites, and that a man who wore a leather jacket and rode a motorcycle could be exactly the kind of person you'd want your children to know. The Fonz's mythology expanded as the show grew. He could fix any mechanical device. He could attract any woman simply by snapping his fingers and saying, "Hey." The jukebox at Arnold's would start playing when he hit it just right. When he pointed his thumbs up and said, everything was going to be fine. He was not quite a superhero, but he was, as the show played it, something close to a neighborhood legend. A man whose reputation was so firmly established that even the local toughest gang members gave him respect. He mediated disputes between rival gangs. He was the person you called when nothing else had worked.
I'm gonna make it up to you guys, see? I brought this stuff.
What's that junk?
All right, hey, everybody grab a handful. I get smart.
And despite all of this mythology, Fonzie had genuine vulnerability. He struggled to admit weakness. He could not say the word wrong when he had made a mistake. A running gag across multiple seasons where he would start to say he had been were, and physically could not complete the word, as though his own identity required him to be incapable of error. He had no family of his own in any meaningful sense. The Cunninghams were his surrogate family, and the show treated his attachment to them with genuine emotional seriousness. When Fonzie's feelings were hurt, when he was scared, when he needed help, it was Richie he turned to. That was the relationship that grounded the whole show. Henry Winkler was top billed alongside Ron Howard by season 3.
My nephew, Spike, who's also a kid, but very, very cool. Now, if you've seen him.
The two characters shared the center of the show for the entire middle period, its most popular and most culturally resonant years. And it was this double center that made Happy Days work at the level it did during the height of its popularity. Part 3, High School, College, and Growing Up. The earliest seasons of Happy Days follow Richie and his friends through the rituals and preoccupations of 1950s high school life. Richie wants to date girls and mostly fails. He gets into situations he can't get out of. He and Potsy dress in drag to get into a dance. He considers joining a local gang and thinks better of it. He navigates the gap between who he wants to be, somebody with the Fonz's effortless confidence, and who he actually is.
I used to put extra gravy on the men's mashed potatoes and they'd do anything for me.
My squad brings their lunch.
Which is a decent kid who overthinks things and needs to talk them through with someone before he understands what he actually believes. One of the show's consistent pleasures in the early seasons is watching Richie try to be cool and fail. Not because he's a fool, but because he's an earnest person operating in a world that rewards a specific kind of nonchalance he doesn't naturally possess. Fonzie doesn't try to be cool. Richie tries constantly and never quite arrives. The friendship between them worked precisely because of that gap. Fonzie saw in Richie what he himself could never be: decent, connected to family, loved by people rather than merely respected. And Richie saw in Fonzie what he couldn't manufacture for himself. They needed each other in ways neither of them was ever quite willing to say directly.
Our group got our first good job, playing for a dance at the Leopard Lodge.
Hey, there are a lot of good-looking chicks there.
The Cunningham household is the show's moral center throughout this period. Howard and Marion don't lecture exactly. They present, they model, they ask questions that get to the heart of whatever the week's problem is. The show's format was gentle and episodic, with stories that resolved inside a single half hour and lessons delivered without heaviness. The Cunningham home was the place where resolution happened. Fonzie's apartment above the garage was where wisdom came from. Arnold's drive-in was where problems began. As the show moved into its middle seasons, Richie graduated from Jefferson High and enrolled at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Potsy enrolled with him, and the two became roommates during their college years.
Oh, Richard, that's so thoughtful of you.
And Dad, How would you like to have your own set of custom golf clubs?
The transition changed the texture of the stories without changing their fundamental shape. College brought new social situations, new anxieties about the future, and new pressure to decide what kind of person Richie was actually going to be. It was during this period that the show was at its most popular, with Fonzie fully integrated into the central storyline and the cast operating as a genuine ensemble. The love interests who passed through Richie's life in these years were many and varied. The show had considerable fun with his continuous inability to successfully pursue a relationship, but the one who would last was Lori Beth Allen, played by Linda Goodfriend, who joined the cast in season 6. She was smart, patient, and gave Richie someone who matched him.
Went to camp, you were 9 years old.
So that's when I knew him.
I don't know if that's worth 6 tickets.
Someone he couldn't charm or impress into liking him, but who liked him anyway, which turned out to be what he needed. The most famous single moment in the show's entire run came in a 5th season episode that aired in September 1977, when Fonzie, on a dare, water skied over a shark tank while on vacation in Hollywood. The sequence was inspired by Henry Winkler's actual water skiing abilities and was intended as a crowd-pleasing stunt. It delivered what it promised. It also, in retrospect, became the cultural shorthand for a television show going too far. The phrase, "jump the shark," coined years later, entered the language as a reference to this specific scene, and came to mean the moment when a long-running series lost its way.
Week away. Now you can take a shower after you win.
Whether the show had actually lost its way at that point is a fair debate. What's not debatable is that the moment has outlasted almost everything else the show produced. Part 4, Chachi, Joni, and the Later Years. The character who would define the show's later seasons arrived in season 5. Chachi Arcola, played by Scott Baio, was Fonzie's younger cousin, a teenager with some of the Fonz's natural cool, but without any of his discipline or self-possession. He was 17, eager, and immediately taken with Joni Cunningham. The relationship between Chachi and Joni became the second significant romantic story of the show's run, a younger generation's version of what Richie and Lori Beth represented for the older one. Scott Baio was 18 when he joined the cast and had a natural charm that made Chachi immediately popular with younger audiences.
Take care of it. It's my problem now. Get out of here.
No, Fonz, this is my problem. I think
You asked me for help. I'm helping you. Out of here. Get out.
The dynamic between Chachi and Joni, attraction, friction, breakups, reunions, ran through the show's later seasons and gave the younger generation of characters their own storyline that could operate alongside whatever Fonzie and the established ensemble were doing. Chachi had the Fonzie swagger without the Fonzie wisdom, which made him a figure of both comedy and genuine emotional stakes. You rooted for him to grow up, because you could see that he would, eventually, if given enough time and enough scenes with Fonzie and the Cunninghams, to observe what actually mattered. By this point in the show's history, the setting had moved from the mid-1950s into the early 1960s.
Dancing Drinkwater twins, Maisie and Daisy. Fun girls.
Each season of Happy Days roughly corresponded to 1 year in the show's internal timeline, tracking from 1955 to 1965 across 11 seasons. The music changed, the cultural references shifted, and the characters aged in ways that required the show to evolve. The high school stories had given way to college stories, which had given way to young adult stories, and the world of 1955 Milwaukee was becoming the world of 1962 Milwaukee. Less purely nostalgic, more complicated, reflecting the fact that the early 1960s were the years in which the innocence the show had been celebrating was beginning to show its limits. Arnold's drive-in itself underwent a change. Pat Morita's Arnold Takahashi left the show.
Can you tango, waltz, do the cha-cha?
Yeah, I can do all those.
I need a teacher.
And the drive-in was taken over by a new character named Al Del Vecchio, played by Al Molinaro, who became a regular presence and a warm figure in the later seasons. The physical space remained the same gathering place: a booth, a jukebox, the smell of hamburgers, the permanence of a neighborhood institution, but the face behind the counter changed. It was a small detail, the kind of change that registers over time rather than all at once, and it was one of many ways the show acknowledged that the world it was depicting was not frozen, but in motion. In season 10, Joni and Chachi left Milwaukee for Chicago, attempting to launch a music career, which was the premise of the spin-off series Joni Loves Chachi. That show ran for 2 seasons before being canceled in 1983.
It had furniture.
You want furniture? Go back home.
Its ratings were poor. The chemistry that worked between Joni and Chachi as part of the Happy Days ensemble didn't translate fully to a show built entirely around them, and both Aaron Moran and Scott Baio returned to Happy Days for the show's final season. Part 5. Richie leaves, Fonzie leads. At the end of the 7th season, Ron Howard left Happy Days. His film career had been building throughout the show's run. He had worked with George Lucas on American Graffiti and was increasingly drawn toward directing. And by 1980, he was ready to move on from the show that had defined his young career. His departure was handled with dignity by the writing team. Richie Cunningham was written out by enlisting in the United States Army, posted to Greenland.
I'm a very rich man. I get what I want. Here's $1.
Before he left Milwaukee, he married Lori Beth by telephone, a wedding ceremony conducted over the phone from an Army base, with Fonzie standing in for him on the Milwaukee end of the line, repeating Richie's vows as directed. It was an unusual solution that the show played with as much warmth as the format allowed. The departure of Ron Howard was the most significant structural change in the show's history. For the first 7 seasons, Richie had been the protagonist, the character through whose eyes the audience experienced Milwaukee. The Cunningham house was Richie's house. Arnold's Drive-In was where Richie and his friends went. Every storyline had Richie at or near its center, even when Fonzie was generating the most energy. When Howard left, the show reorganized around Fonzie.
We need it. We'll get jobs. I'm not talking about some frat dance where we got paid in beer.
Henry Winkler received sole top billing in the opening credits. The Fonz, already the most beloved character, became the central figure. The show was now his story, and the challenge was to sustain that without the specific counterweight of Richie's decency and earnestness to play against. Ralph Malph also left for military service at the same point as Richie, removing another original member of the core ensemble. Don Most came back as a guest star in the final season, with Ralph mentioned as having pursued a career in optometry like his father. Potsy remained a recurring presence in the later seasons as assistant manager at Cunningham Hardware, though his character became increasingly peripheral. The show introduced new characters to fill the gaps left by the departures.
I know why, but why does it have to be tomorrow night? I mean, this is business. It's got to be tomorrow night.
Ted McGinley joined the cast as Roger Phillips, Marion's nephew, who became a basketball coach and English teacher at Jefferson High. Crystal Bernard played Casey Cunningham, Howard's niece, who moved in with the family while Joni was away. These characters were functional additions, competent, well-acted, but they could not carry the emotional weight that Richie had provided. The show compensated by deepening the Fonzie storylines, giving him relationships and professional growth and personal challenges that expanded his character beyond the mythology of the early seasons. Fonzie, in the show's later seasons, evolved in ways that would have seemed impossible in season 1. He became a mechanic who owned his own garage. He taught automotive classes. He eventually became the dean of boys at George S. Patton Vocational High School.
In business, Do you have collateral?
Hey, no, man, I ain't been sick a day in my life.
A development that worked within the show's internal logic, because his authority had always come from respect rather than credentials, and making that official was the show's way of completing his arc from dropout to respected community figure. The arc took 11 years and traced the distance between who Fonzie had been in 1955 and who he had become by 1965. Part 6, the finale and what it meant. The 11th and final season of Happy Days brought the story to its conclusion in the way that long-running ensemble comedies rarely manage, with genuine emotional weight and a sense of earned ending. Joni and Chachi came back from Chicago, where their spin-off series, Joni Loves Chachi, had run for 2 seasons on ABC before being canceled in 1983.
With 102 temperature. And what about the time I walked into your room?
Dad, I'll do it.
The show had never found the audience it needed, and both Aaron Moran and Scott Baio returned to Milwaukee and to the main show. Their wedding, the wedding between Fonzie's young cousin and Howard and Marion's daughter, became the central event of the final season. The episode Passages featured the ceremony, with the Cunninghams and Chachi's family uniting in the way the show had been building toward for years. It was a joining of the 2 most important families in the show's world, and it gave Howard and Marion the closure their characters had been moving toward, since Joni was a small child in the background of scenes about Richie and his friends. Richie returned too. Ron Howard came back for several episodes in the final season, giving the show's ending a completeness it couldn't have had without him.
I'll tell you something, you go home, you get your beauty sleep, all right? Hey, Mouth, you really need sleep.
He and Lori Beth now had a son, Richard Cunningham Jr., and Richie was trying to figure out what life looked like on the other side of military service. Howard and Marion had lined up a job interview for him at the Milwaukee Journal, which would have been a comfortable and respectable life. But Richie wanted to go to California to try to become a Hollywood screenwriter, to pursue the thing he had always wanted, rather than the thing that had been arranged for him. The conflict was between obligation and ambition, between the safe and familiar life Milwaukee offered and the possibilities that lay beyond it. It was the same tension the show had always played with, the tension that had made Fonzie's world and Richie's world so different and so complementary.
What else did they say, Fonz?
I'm gonna have an operation.
Oh, not an operation!
After a confrontation with Howard and a conversation with Fonzie that settled the matter the way conversations with Fonzie always did, Richie decided to go. Howard and Marion supported him. The family said goodbye to Richie, to Lori Beth, to their grandson, and let them leave. The series finale, Passages Part 3, aired on September 24th, 1984. Joni and Chachi were married in front of everyone who mattered. The Cunningham household came together one final time. The show closed the way it had opened, with this family, in this house, in this version of Milwaukee, and the closing scene carried the weight of 11 years of stories that had ended in the same place they always ended. Everyone still in each other's lives, still taking care of each other, still going to be all right.
Well, what do you think I should do?
Get out of here. No, that was just a little joke.
The show had run from January 15th, 1974 to September 24th, 1984, across 255 episodes and 11 seasons. It had started as a gentle, nostalgic comedy about a teenager in 1955 Milwaukee and had become something larger, a television institution whose most beloved character had his leather jacket acquired by the Smithsonian, whose spin-offs had given American television Laverne and Shirley and Mork and Mindy, and whose central friendship between a clean-cut red-haired kid and a greaser with a motorcycle had been one of the defining television relationships of the 1970s. Howard and Marion stayed in Milwaukee. Richie went to California. Fonzie kept the garage and kept the school and kept looking after the neighborhood. and the show ended the way it had always wanted to, with the people it loved in the place it had built for them, saying goodbye properly. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. There is a lot more where this came from,